All right, the first cell, we're going to look at the mitochondria. This is very interesting because the reason I'm going to focus on the mitochondria is because there is a belief in science that the mitochondria and the cell were separate at one time and then came together. So basically they say the mitochondria was eaten by a simple celled organism and then became the powerhouse for the cell. Again, this is a problem to me as I think about the concept of, okay, what was powering the cell before it had a mitochondria? And not only that, but how did it eat the mitochondria and then make the decision not to digest the mitochondria, but instead to make a symbiotic relationship occur with the mitochondria? How could that first cell make those kind of decisions? It doesn't have a brain. It doesn't have the capability to go, oh my, I just ate a battery, and instead of it killing me or instead of me just digesting it, hey, how about if I use it as my power source? Okay, that to me is like, I don't know, a fairy tale. Really, it doesn't even make sense, and yet this is what science is trying to tell you happened. First, how fantastical to think that a cell can plan to eat or digest or break up or lyse a mitochondria and then somehow decide, wait, this would benefit me if I didn't eat it, but kept it captive to give me energy. How could it even think that way? It doesn't have a brain. How is the cell deciding this? Even if it did have this capability, does it make sense logically? Can you decide, since you ate a chicken that had wings, you will now somehow farm the wings off that chicken and add it to your DNA so that you can grow your own wings and fly? I wish we could do that. Wouldn't that be great? But we can't. When we eat the chicken and eat the wing, we ate it. It did not become part of our DNA telling us, here we go, we can have wings now. This is about as far-fetched as the first cell eating the mitochondria and then from that point out having its own mitochondria powerhouse. Mitochondria has its very own DNA because it's such a complex organelle, yet the cell's DNA say when to make a mitochondria. The two are tied together. How did this get written into the cell's DNA? See, there had to be some way that information showed up in the DNA of the cell to say, let's make more mitochondria. And me just eating a chicken wing did not give my DNA the capability to say, here, I'll make some wings for you. The mitochondria DNA isn't capable of independently producing all proteins needed for it to be even functionable on its own. It relies completely on imported DNA from the cell nucleus to produce many products that it needs to function correctly. How did this DNA show up in the nucleus of the cell after being eaten? It doesn't make any logical sense. Mitochondria produce the majority of ATP that the cell needs to accomplish all the tasks of life. They also signal between cells and help signal apoptosis. And apoptosis is the time in which a cell needs to die. They also produce much needed heat for the body in a process called non-shivering thermogenesis. Mitochondria also store vital calcium that the cell needs to perform many cellular processes such as releasing neurotransmitters from a nerve cell or hormones from endocrine cells. Muscles can't function without the proper amount of calcium. Even blood clotting cannot happen without regulating calcium by absorbing them and holding them until the cell calls for them. How did all this happen without the mitochondria? And once the mitochondria became part of the cell by accidental ingestion, how did the cell begin to communicate its needs for the mitochondria? How did the mitochondria understand these needs and begin to do all the specific jobs the cell needed it to do? What powered the cell before it ate the mitochondria? What kept that first mitochondria alive and protected from the outside world before it was consumed by the cell, which meant it wasn't protected very well since it got eaten? What formed and built that first mitochondria? We still have to say that has to be dealt with. Where did the instructions come from for that mitochondria? In the cell, mitochondria are actually formed to exist in different compartments or regions of the cell. Their location actually dictates what distinct role that mitochondria will carry out for the cell. If the first cell just ate a mitochondria so it could get more energy, then how did the mitochondria end up doing so many different things for the cell? And how did they get assigned to the different areas to do very specific roles for the cell? Something very smart had to have planned this. The number of mitochondria cells differ depending on what type of cell they are in. Cells in the body that must use a lot of energy have more mitochondria than those who don't need energy to do their job. A blood cell just hitches a ride in the circulatory system and moves around the body as the heart pumps it. So they don't need to be powered by mitochondria. And in fact, a blood cell has no mitochondria at all. The heart, however, needs lots of energy to keep pumping those lazy blood cells around, so the heart needs lots of mitochondria. In fact, mitochondria take up about 40% of the space in the cytoplasm of a heart muscle cell. This sure looks like a very brilliant plan orchestrated and designed by a being much smarter than us. How can we say this just happened by chance of a digestive accident where a single cell just ate a mitochondria and then over millions of years decided to keep the mitochondria for some cells while losing them completely for others? So the mitochondria alone, the idea that the evolutionists have that it just happened to be eaten by chance does not fit logic. What it does fit is a designer that intentionally and purposefully designed it, just as that designer intentionally and purposely designed you. And that same designer, God, as much as he has a purpose for the mitochondria, even more so, he has a purpose for you. Getting to know your Creator is essential to life. My prayer for you this year is basically that you will see through his creation the God that made you. Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse." And so my prayer for you this year is that as you study all that has been made, even down to the single cell, that you will see a God that loves you and designed you and has a purpose for your life.